Welcome to the Catapult Effect, a podcast where professionals like you turn challenges into opportunities for extraordinary growth. If you're tired of struggling, feeling lost, and ready to catapult yourself into the best version of you, then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Katie Wrigley.
Welcome back to the Catapult Effect podcast. I am your host, Katie Wrigley, and I have an absolutely incredible guest with me today, Andrew Levander. Am I saying that right, Andrew?
You are.
All right. Just wanted to make sure. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a master addiction counselor, and is a licensed in California and Nevada. He holds national certifications as the addictions counselor, master's addictions counselor, certified chemical dependency counselor, certified bereavement counselor, certified cognitive-behavioral therapist. Wow, you have lots of certifications. I'm so impressed. I am actually going to leave a lot of this into the show notes so you guys can check it out himself, because I don't want to eat up the time that we have to talk to this amazing guest with his background, even though I actually had intended to do this. But suffice it to say, Andrew Levander is an absolutely incredible human being. He's been featured on Oprah. He's been featured on Dr. Phil, and I am honored that he is spending his time on my podcast today. Welcome to the Catapult Effect podcast, Andrew. I'm so psyched to get to know you better.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Would you be willing to share a little bit of your story of what got you interested in becoming a marriage and family counselor, plus all the other accolades that you have received and the extra learning that you've given yourself, including the master addiction counselor as well?
Sure. I would say by accident is how I have one of those sad stories, childhoods, and the truth is, after dinner one night, my mother said that she'd like to go shopping, and if I wanted to go with, and we ended up in the parking lot of who would become my first therapist in life-changing relationship with a guy named Rick Tivers in the North Shore of Chicago. And I remember leaving his office after that first session, having the thought, I was 15, having the thought, what a cool job. This guy just tries to help people. And I hadn't ever considered at 15 that one could have a career in trying to help other people. And I was in such need myself that it just felt right. And then I thought, if I make it out of childhood, I'm going to look into that. And
Wow.
That's what happened. I made it out of childhood and went to graduate school.
Wow. Do you have any idea what made your mom, or maybe compelled your mom, to invite you to go with her that evening?
Yeah, I was so, I was so unhappy as a kid, and I had an eating disorder, and I couldn't find my way. And at the time that I went, nobody knew this, but I was also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse beginning at the age of about 7. And with that kind of filling in the gaps, it certainly, well, I guess at least to me, made sense where so much of that pain came from.
Right.
And as I've learned as a therapist, and well, just in living, if we don't talk it out, we're going to act it out. And so I was doing a lot of acting out because I could not manage. I didn't know how to think about it or how to talk about it. And
Right.
so it was was finding ways to come out. And unfortunately, those aren't very healthy ways. But I credit those unhealthy manifestations of my pain for ringing some bells that
Mhm.
I needed help. So that's
Yeah.
how I got there.
I'm so glad that you did. And now
Oh,
you
thank you.
in a position to draw from your own personal experience to help others. So, in your professional opinion, not just from your own experience, and I have had some of this in my past as well, and I'm really noting lately, before I ask the question, I'm really understanding the impact that this event, or repeated events in my case, that happened to me as a child and was sexual abuse related and happened before the age of 7. What is the enormity of that impact on a child who isn't protected in those younger years? And what is the likelihood they're going to turn to addiction or become pretty self-destructive in later years due to that early childhood abuse and trauma?
Well, my mind was racing as you were talking and asking this question. I don't have a statistic. I just have 25 years of anecdotal experience as a clinician, and then the work that I did myself. Um, I think there is a a profound link between early experiences of um, significant boundary violations that include our mind and our bodies, and the development of maladaptive coping mechanisms to deal with those violations. Um, I think that the first part of your question was what happens to a person. Um, well, at least for me, um, I didn't know it at the time, but I was I was trying to find a way to be invisible, um, and then it kind of in hindsight again, I became progressively more and more visible.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of the eating disorder, literally shrinking myself down, um, making myself smaller. The making myself smaller was directly related to the powerlessness that I think so many of us feel,
Mm-hmm.
and how literally small we are in the world where other people can, um, well, do what they want, um, and to the most vulnerable people.
Right.
And um, there's, there's no manual for how to be in this world, anyways, let alone how to survive. And now, um, I in an attempt to look on not the bright side of things, but what an incredible opportunity people who have been harmed have, who make it. Um, I think we're remarkable. I think that
Yeah.
it's life is hard enough on its own, and we are wired to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I went to tremendous lengths to survive. And what's oftentimes I think what's helped me as a clinician. There's a saying that I heard: for those who understand, an explanation isn't necessary, and for
Mm-hmm.
those who don't understand, an explanation is impossible. And because of my own personal experiences, I can sit with somebody, like a new client, for example, and I haven't shared my story, but there's a connection there,
Mm-hmm.
um, and both of us know it, but
Yeah.
it's difficult to explain, which I think is the beauty of a therapeutic relationship with somebody that you don't have to explain yourself to, that doesn't require an explanation, justification. You can just be a mess, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think um, that's a unique opportunity to afford somebody. Um, and it's not necessarily altruistic. Um, it's what I'm not qualified to do anything else. Is how I've
Yeah.
kind of put it to other people, um, and that has its pros and cons.
Yeah.
But being a highly sensitive person um, uh, has been great, and it's tiring at times.
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely. I also identify as being highly sensitive. And 2 weeks ago, we had a big cognitive movement event out in San Diego. And I really realized on a whole new level how sensitive I am to energy. And so, in that, it was a 5-day conference and it is amazing. And through the conference, Liz and Bill, the head of cognitive movement, they take people from shame up through enlightenment, as per David Hawkins and Power versus Force with his map of consciousness, I believe he calls it. And they were at the level of grief. And for some reason, I thought, okay, I'm curious what I feel when I stand in front of the room. I couldn't stand in front of the room. The grief that was coming off of everybody as they attached to it was so high. I started to well up, even though I wasn't actually feeling any grief. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to go back over to the side where I can be in observer mode. And I'm not. And I'm like doing all my energetic stuff to help kind of protect my body. I'm like, wow, I really feel energy. Like, oh, this explains so much. Because before you get that awareness, you don't realize how influenced you get by other people. And I agree that being highly sensitive, that allows us to have a level of empathy that people who are less sensitive may have to work harder to get. I'm not saying that they can't reach it, but I think it comes easier to highly sensitive people because we're just wired that way. We're feeling everything everywhere all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah, and it's not fun. It's
No.
it's no.
Oh,
Um,
no, it's not.
it's just one of those things that I guess we, like anything else, we learn to adapt to, and now I appreciate it. Like, Dr. Brene Brown's book, a book about the gifts of vulnerability, and
Yes.
um, that's just a powerful statement because it's not looked at that way. It's
Right.
something that we repel, um,
Mm-hmm.
um, or I guess we don't. And when you don't repel it, although it's difficult at times to be like a sponge to other people's emotions, um, I don't know. I honestly, uh, there is a part of being as sensitive as I am that I have been teased for, that lots more negative in, uh,
Mm-hmm.
um, and not that I can, but I wouldn't change it for anything.
Yeah,
I just
same.
wouldn't.
Yeah, I also received bullying and teasing myself for being so sensitive, and I also wouldn't change it for the world. I tried to deny it for the longest time and pretended I didn't, so then that would have me like bawling my eyes out at watching an episode of Baywatch, as an example, like something that doesn't normally elicit tears, and I'd have a massive emotional purge. It's
That's so
like,
funny. I have this ongoing joke that I cry at AT&T commercials. It's
I
the
get
same
it.
kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like, all right, I'm not acknowledging some emotion that came from somewhere. Like, this
Right.
is not a response that's in alignment with what I'm watching. Like, it's friggin' Baywatch. Like, really? Why am I crying? And I mean, like, the shirt was wet level of tears
Yeah.
crying. I'm like, what is going on? Like, I'm still a teenager. I don't get it. Like, okay, this is weird. But yeah, that's what it's like to be highly sensitive. But when
Mhm.
we get into these roles like you're in now, and I love that you've been doing this for 25 years. I've been able to do it full time for 3. And childhood trauma has been a huge piece of almost everyone's story that's come to see me.
Yeah, like
And
at my treatment center, it's called the Encino Detox Center, and we have the two levels of care are detox and residential.
mhm,
And um, of the, I don't even know how many now, over 100 clients. We've been open for about a year and 3 months.
mhm,
We've had a little over 100 clients, and
wow,
of the male clients, I'm just tracking um, how many men who come in have a past experience of an unwanted sexual experience. Um, and I call it that because not everybody calls it trauma, or different names for it. So, um, and we're at about 67%,
gosh,
which was, I knew that it was really high. I know that the national kind of statistics are 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys have experienced an unwanted sexual um, experience before the age of 18. Um, but your earlier question about how frequent or common is the connection between the development of an addiction and trauma? Well, in our case, 67%, and it's it's been a specialty, I guess, of mine for quite some time, but that wasn't my initial intention of opening the Encino. It was to be a drug rehab because I'm a drug addict and alcoholic in recovery, but there are so many commonalities underneath the drugs and underneath the booze. The pain is very similar, and
Mm-hmm.
that, I think, is one of the things that makes us different as a treatment center. Is that we don't sit around and talk about booze and drugs. We talk about the commonality, the binding agent, which is pain. And all of our stories are different, but the pain is, I just want to say, the same.
Mm-hmm.
We know people who have experienced, tremendous loss or abuse of any kind, um, whatever the situation might be. There is a pain that I think that we share in common. Um, I'm writing a book called um, Foraging, The Longing of Lonely Children. And the idea of foraging isn't usually applied to um, looking to like a walking umbilical cord, looking to
Mm-hmm.
plug in somewhere um, to meet a whole host of needs. And as a forager of what I mean, in my experience, food and opiates and alcohol and um, and then times of depletion and no food and um, it was a different way, I think, that my brain was looking at this common experience, and um, it's been life changing for me, and I know for so many of the clients that have come through here, and clients over the last 25 years. Um, Boys and men do not sit around talking about being sexually abused. We just don't. And we don't talk about eating disorders, and we don't talk about loneliness. But I do. And
Good.
um, it's quite something uh, to be a fly on the wall in a room of men, um, talking about things that men don't generally talk about. It's life changing.
Yeah. I can't even imagine. It would be such an honor to be able to be in that room and hear that, and I'm so glad that you're providing this safe space for men because that's a big flaw in society and pointing the finger also at women. There aren't that many women who have evolved enough yet to be able to hold space for a man to talk about those kind of experiences because it hasn't been acceptable for so long. So it's not just men that are told to be stoic. We haven't allowed that space as a general rule yet. We aren't quite there. I hope we will get there pretty soon, but I'm happy and really excited and behind any man that I hear such as yourself, and I've heard some others out there that are really stepping into their strength as leaders and owning a lot of the trauma, including sexual unwanted trauma that they've had in their life that people tend to think doesn't happen to men. It's like, look, women may get sexually traumatized more frequently, but that doesn't mean that men aren't impacted, and it's going to have a different psychological impact on a man and a woman. Just the way that we're raised, the way that we're told what is we should or shouldn't, using air quotes if you're
Yeah,
listening and not watching, do with our bodies. And so there's a different kind of response to it. The same way, I'm not even going to go there. I was going to do kind of a lower vibrational people who don't understand same-sex relationships. I don't even want to go there though, because that's not what this is about. This is about helping people who are trying to move forward and heal themselves. And thank you for creating Encino Detox to give that space to men that they can start to heal these things and realize that they don't have any reason to feel shame over what they've gone through. So
yeah,
thank you.
yeah. My pleasure.
So what you already started to talk about it a little, and I was kind of, actually, I want to tap before we go more into everything you do at Encino Detox. Can you talk a little bit about what's happening in the brain and nervous system that allows an addiction to get created? Like, what are some of the things, just I know it's going to be different for everybody, but one of those general themes
Sure.
that you're seeing that basically lead someone into addiction and keeps them in there?
Well, most of us engage in lots of different behaviors for the very simple reason to have needs met. And I mean, we all have different needs, but it's kind of a small list,
Mm-hmm.
uh, generally speaking. And so the need for to quiet the brain, to alleviate emotional suffering. That's why some of us pick opiates and booze, and some of us pick methamphetamine and cocaine, and different needs are being met. And specifically in the brain, it literally gets hijacked. It becomes the perfect environment for, somebody, for this discussion, somebody who's experienced trauma and has then been in this process of retreating from relationships, um, both with themselves and with other people. There is an ease, the ability to turn the world off, to hit pause, and to step off for a little while is an incredibly powerful experience.
Yeah,
And
it is.
what gets reinforced with somebody who has a traumatic history, who then develops a relationship with substances or behaviors, um, is that coming from experiences of zero control to putting ourselves in a position to be able to manage, although destructively, to manage our life experiences, our emotions, to downregulate, to upregulate, whatever it is the need is in that moment, um, is a profound experience. And when we try to talk to people intellectually about the dangers of substance abuse and just say no, we're just having two different conversations. And it's oftentimes why it doesn't work,
Right.
because it's not being seen through the lens of the person in pain who has turned to substances to meet the needs that people have not, um, or that person doesn't trust can,
Mm-hmm.
um, just based on their own life experience. Um, so back to the one of the first things I said is we are wired to survive, and
Mm-hmm.
it's an extreme example, but people who struggle with like self-injurious behavior, like cutting, burning, scratching,
Mm-hmm.
um, that is seen by most people as a suicidal gesture,
Mm-hmm.
whereas I see it as suicide prevention.
Mm. Yeah, I agree
And
with that actually.
and it's the lengths to which people will go to live another day.
Yeah.
Um, at best, even living daily with the ambiguity of wanting to live and not wanting to live.
Yeah.
Um, so, um, yeah, I just think when the amygdala, when the frontal cortex, when um, the different parts of our brains are activated and satiated, and that something on a much bigger level happens organically. And that's why for most of us addicts in recovery or not in recovery, um, in the midst of the addiction, it doesn't feel like a choice.
Right.
Um, once we pause that addiction, get a little bit of clean time, it then begins to, it takes on more of choice is a factor now. Um, I have this toolbox of new coping mechanisms. I'm either going to use it or I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on some level, that part is a choice. There's a lot of
Yeah.
debate out there on, the disease model of addiction. Um, I don't even know where I stand. This second, I don't even care. I know that for me, um, it got to the point where I, um, I didn't want to live anymore. I
Mhm.
wrote a suicide note. I prepared. Um, I drank a bottle of vodka all before 8 o'clock in the morning, and I was done. And for whatever reason, I called 911 um, on myself and
Oh,
asked for help. And um, and that's to this day I don't know why. Um, but God knows I'm grateful that I did make that choice. And in that moment, it was a choice, I suppose. You know,
I'm great.
the psychiatrist at the psych hospital said, "Did you drink that much to get the courage to end your life, or did you drink that much hoping that you would pass out to avoid ending your life?" And I thought it
Oh,
was a really great question that I still don't have the
that is,
answer to.
wow. Wow.
Um,
That person has some insight. Wow.
yeah. Um, and so I'm not, I don't think of myself as like a grateful addict or alcoholic, or I, I just don't think about things that way. Um, what I am grateful for is the ability to have experienced things that millions of other people have, um, and wanted to talk about it, or
Hmm.
at least wanted to be available if somebody else wanted to talk about it. Uh, because I've learned that we don't die from thoughts and feelings. We just don't.
No.
Uh, we become terrified of them, um, and sometimes what's wrong with us is the way that we think about us. Like
Yeah.
maybe
Right.
that's it. Um, Not to minimize it, but I didn't know that it was an option to think differently about myself.
Right.
We do this very powerful writing exercise titled "What If I'm Wrong About Me?" And it's very simple. Somebody's asked, if you came to believe that you were wrong about you, how would your life be different?
Ooh.
And the result of honestly looking at that question um, is really simple and profound. Um, well, I would be happy, and I wouldn't be afraid, and I would take more risks, and I wouldn't procrastinate. And they just lay out a blueprint for, at least the way that I look at it, they've just given us a roadmap of what it is that this person wants.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
and then it makes it easier to go find that, because it was in you the whole time. It just, we needed to find a creative way to get it out. And
Mhm.
um, and then the last thing on that is, most of the thoughts we have about us, I have found, don't even belong to us. They
No.
were ascribed either in somebody's words or actions.
Hmm.
And it's a lot, for me at least, it was easier to relinquish something that wasn't mine to begin with. But as children, we take it on as it must be true.
Yep.
Yeah, I thank you for asking these questions. It's I forget to remember. Uh, um, uh, it's like a joyful conversation to have, even though it's, addressing things that I spent 30 years or more not talking about.
Right.
So I appreciate the work that you're doing, and speaking it out into the world so that people can. On our website, there's a statement, a quote that says, the most something like, the most powerful words in the world are "me too." That moment that you realize that someone else in the world has
Oh.
had a similar thought or experience as you
Mhm.
have. And I think that that's the binding agent for coming to treatment, is hearing something that resonates, because we think we're
That
alone.
we do. And that hit me right in the feels. Just the warmth that you feel when someone tells you, like, you're sharing your most gut wrenching, shameful moment in life, and someone goes, "Yeah, me too." And suddenly it's your shame is like, wait, I'm not alone. It's so supportive. And I really appreciate you answering so candidly and vulnerably. And there's a couple things that you said that I want to go back to. The first is that ability to shut out the world. If you have never been in pain, I don't expect you to understand how hard it is. And I'm talking emotional and physical pain. And honestly, as someone who's dealt with huge quantities of both, the emotional pain oftentimes is harder to deal with than the physical pain because we haven't been taught what to do with it. And when you have empowered yourself, even though it's not healthy, but when you have felt like people have taken your power, part of what I heard in what you said, Andrew, is that that addict who's starting to engage in whatever that activity is, they're empowering themselves to take control and help themselves in that moment. No, it's not healthy. No, it's not the best thing for them. But that is the first step to them starting to feel like they can actually be a sovereign soul and not dictated by other people who have hurt them and violated their boundaries from a young age. And I am an addict myself. Sugar, honestly, was the hardest one to kick, but I had a cocaine habit that I'm now 7 years away from. I was a binge drinker, which I'm now 6 years away from. I did a whole bunch of other crap that was really bad for me that I'm now a good deal removed from. And I know that roller coaster. And the only reason I didn't get addicted to opiates, because I remember the first time a doctor gave me an opiate, I was like, oh my God, this is a fuck it all pill. I care about nothing right now. Give me more. And then I puked. I'm like, I don't really like that part. And I still took them on and off, but thank God that I don't tolerate any synthetic painkiller because I would have gone down the opiate rabbit hole. I have no doubt. I know myself too well to think anything else. It was because they made me so sick
Mm-hmm.
that kept me from that. And thank God that that's the way my body was built. I don't tolerate any synthetic pain meds, including Tylenol, Advil, Aleve, none of them.
Mm.
They all make me sick, which is
Lucky.
tricky with high pain, but it's also led me to figure out other ways to heal the pain that actually last a lot longer than an Advil too. But those days where I didn't have the awareness, that silence that addiction would give me, that line of Coke would give me, or that opiate would give me, or that drink that I was having on my own where no one could see me, that was where I got peace. And then come out of it and there would be the shame. And then that would make me want to continue to go back to it again. And I think Brene Brown talks about that the best, and I resonated with her poo-poo platter of addiction because that was me. I smoked cigarettes for 18 years and took cannabis from fun recreational to abused. And I no longer abuse it. However, because I've used it for so long, I am, in full disclosure, still working to break that dependence. I still use it for sleep because I've been using it since I was 19. So that's going to take a little bit longer for my nervous system to acclimate to not having it. But oh my gosh, compared to the level I was abusing it before, I don't abuse it anymore. I take my dose at night. That's it. And I don't like that I still need it. So I am still working to clear that out. But at some point, you've kind of pickled yourself a little bit, and it's going to take the body a little bit more time. You can't unpickle,
Yeah.
but you can find a new neural pathway that supports the behavior that you want, and you can create a new one. And I haven't gotten there in my healing yet, but I know I will. Can you tell us more about Encino Detox? So you mentioned there you have two levels. You have the residential and then the detox side. So who is Encino Detox for? And then tell us how we can find you, Andrew.
Okay. We are primary substance use disorder treatment center. We are licensed and with the state and accredited through the Joint Commission on Accreditation. We have 12 beds, all single rooms. We put this place together meticulously from the single rooms for some privacy to the thread count to the executive chef
Wow.
who was trained by Wolfgang Puck to the layout of the facility and the jacuzzi and the hammock areas and it's a giant sprawling outside. And now that it's not so hot, we spend a lot of time outside. And It's for men and women over the age of 18, where substances, um, including alcohol, are um, the primary disorder, as opposed to mental health being the primary.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, we're dual diagnosis, substance first, then mental health, and they're always paired up and going together on some level. So, um, so that's who it's for. Men and women come from all over the country, um, and we certainly aspire to being the type of place that men and women choose to come to from all over the world. We're finding our foothold. Somebody said, "Well, what do you specialize in?" And well, that's a more complicated question for me, because we don't specialize in everything, um, and everybody's unique and has a little bit of a twist. And so, although I might love alcohol like you do, um, I may or may not be the right place for you. So um, we do a really thorough assessment, and our medical directors double board certified in addiction medicine and psychiatry, and
Wow.
just to make sure that um, this can be the right place for somebody. Um, yeah, that's who it's for. People who
Awesome.
want to end the isolation and despair that comes with oftentimes long-term substance use, and they don't, a person who doesn't want to hide anymore, um, and has the freedom to not have to. Our average length of stay is about 28 days.
Mm-hmm.
Um, most of our clients come on insurance, um, using their PPO benefit. It's either that or cash pay, and the business department will work out, whatever we can with
Right.
somebody. Um, but we've gotten it to where we can get a phone call and that person admitted within 2 hours.
Oh, wow. Ooh, I just got full body chills. That's so good. That's
Yeah,
so needed. When you've got someone in crisis, you cannot wait days. You need to get them in there now
yeah,
before they do something to hurt themselves or end their life.
yeah. So we're really proud of that. The team is great, and yeah, that's this place that I've been thinking about this place for 25 years before I even knew about like what it would
Yeah.
be called. I just took a little bit from here and a little bit from there, and then 25 years later was in a position with the owners to um, put my thumbprint on it, and um, I couldn't be happier. If I
Wow.
didn't do anything else, um, but help to open this place, that would be um, enough. Or being Jewish, that's like a dayenu, like a if the only thing I ever did was open this place, that would have been sufficient.
Oh, I love that. And you're clearly so passionate about your work, and I can tell how much you love the people who are coming into your facility to get healed. Like you can't have the level of passion that you have without mad love for your fellow human being and a strong desire to help them to the greatest degree that
Agreed.
you can. And you're doing that. And thank
Agreed.
you.
We are a pain in the ass group of people historically, and make it difficult to love and care about. But yeah, like you said, I can't help it. I don't want to help it, because it doesn't have to be that way. I have this
No.
great sign. I used to work with adolescents, and I had a sign on my door that said, um, "People who need the most love oftentimes go about asking for it in the most unloving of ways." And
Yes.
that couldn't be more true than the work we're doing here at the Encino.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's so much truth in that statement too, Andrew. When I think back to how I used to ask for love when I was really broken, really traumatized, hadn't started to do any of this work, I was nasty. I was awful. And I'm like, looking back, I'm like, no wonder people left my life. Like, that was a lot. And I really commend the people who were able to see through that and see who I really was. And those people are still in my life. And I'm so grateful for them. But yeah, addicts are not the easiest bunch.
No, we're
Not,
not.
not at all. And you can't trust them.
True.
That what is that old saying, is that how do you know an addict's lying? Their mouth is moving. Like,
Yeah.
that's so, in some ways there is truth to it, but in others it's so condescending and hopeless, but trust can be earned back, and that addict, they're coming from a deep shame pattern, and they can't help but continue to lie. And
Yeah.
until they start to heal, that's going to be the default. So just try to have compassion. If you do know of an addict in your life who's really struggling, just try to look at it through that lens. This is the best they can do.
Yeah.
And send them to Andrew, to Encino Detox.
Yeah. Happy to have anybody. Just, yeah, thank you for having me as a guest and providing the opportunity to talk about us and myself.
Yeah, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to do that. And thank you also for creating Encino Detox. Is there one last call to action that you would want to give someone who is really struggling with addiction right now? Just a message of hope before we wrap up.
I'm thinking that it should be so easy, and there's a million of them. I just know for myself, when I stopped thinking I could do it by myself, is when the quality of my life changed.
Yeah.
And what was underneath that, and what's underneath that for so many of us, is fear. And if we can put fear away to the side for a minute, and like in AA meetings every morning, every day I'm reminded of the only thing I have to do today is like an AA saying, the only thing I have to do is the next right thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And it makes things a lot easier than what about this bill, and what about and my kid and my wife, and I just have to do the next right thing. And maybe that answers the question. The bit of hope is to just do the next right thing.
Yeah.
And I guess that's great about life, is that it gives us that opportunity each day we wake up. It's like a reset button.
It is.
So hopefully today's the day for somebody who's going to listen to your show, and they make a call.
Yeah. And today is the day. If you've been thinking about getting into detox and you're listening to this podcast, that's not an accident. Please go to the show notes, click to the link for Encino Detox, and grab some time with Andrew or another member of his staff and let them know you need help. There is no shame in it, and your entire life is waiting for you. What is going to be possible for you to do when that addiction is in the rearview mirror? And I know it's never fully in the rearview mirror. We always want to remember that we're addicts, but look at what Andrew's done with his life and being of service to people for 25 years to help them get out of hell the same way that he had been in himself. What can you do with your life? What do you want to do with your life? And you have to be here to make it possible. So just start to think about that. Reach out to Encino Detox and take that next right step for yourself.
Our phone number is really easy. It's 833-4EDC help, which is 433-2435.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll make sure that is in the notes as well. So appreciate that.
Of course.
Thank you again for joining me today, Andrew. It's been an honor to get to spend time with you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you, Katie.
And thank you, audience, for you listening. I know you have a lot of choices of what to listen to out on the internet, and I really appreciate you spending your time and energy today with us. I hope you're going to come back again next week for another episode. And until then, please be well.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and leave a 5-star review, which helps grow the podcast and reach others just like you. While you're at it, connect with Katie on social media. You can find her on LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram as @CoachKTDubs. That's CoachKTDubs. This has been The Catapult Effect with Katie Wrigley. Thanks for listening.